The smoke over the ruined German city of Cologne is thick with falling ash and brick dust. But towering above the desolation, the soot-stained twin spires of the great cathedral still stand like a scarred monument to a dying war. It is March 6, 1945. The end of the Second World War in Europe is only weeks away. Yet inside this shattered city center, a lethal collision is about to unfold. Two of the most advanced armored vehicles of the era are crawling through the rubble-choked streets on a direct path toward one another. For the advancing Americans, this moment represents a long-awaited day of reckoning. They are fielding a weapon shrouded in secrecy, the M26 Pershing, a machine designed specifically to break the qualitative dominance of German steel. For the German defenders, their shield is the Panzer V Panther, a legendary and cold-blooded predator that has dominated the battlefields of Europe for years. This is not just another tactical skirmish. It is the ultimate test of two warring nations' engineering, doctrines, and psychological limits. Could the newly arrived Pershing truly stand toe-to-toe with the formidable Panther? Was America finally ready to challenge Germany's most advanced armor? And when these two revolutionary designs finally look each other in the face in the ruins of Cologne, who will pull the trigger first? And what will remain when the dust settles? To understand the immense gravity of this moment, we have to look back at the dramatic clash of military philosophies that forged these steel beasts. Throughout the war, German armored doctrine heavily favored qualitative superiority. Facing overwhelming numerical odds on multiple fronts, the German High Command did not prioritize cheap, easily mass-produced designs. Instead, they demanded highly specialized, heavily armored breakthrough vehicles armed with long-range, high-velocity guns that could securely hold defensive lines and destroy entire enemy columns before the opponents could even get within firing range. The cold, damp air in the ruined streets of Cologne, Germany in March of 1945 carries a heavy, choking stench of cordite, burning masonry, and wet plaster. High above the drifting columns of smoke and the constant fall of brick dust, the magnificent, soot-blackened twin spires of the Cologne Cathedral rise like a scarred mountain of stone over a landscape of absolute desolation. It is a ruined world of rubble and profound silence, where the only sound is the low, metallic rumble of tank engines echoing off the hollow facades of shattered buildings. Two medium American Sherman tanks, supporting the cautious advance of the 3rd Armored Division's infantry, crawl slowly down the narrow, debris-choked channel of Komödienstrasse. Suddenly, the fragile quiet is shattered by a deafening metallic crack. A high-velocity shell from a hidden German Panther tank positioned near the train station tears through the air with terrifying speed. In a fraction of a second, the lead Sherman is ripped apart in a violent eruption of sparks and flame. The impact is catastrophic, instantly killing 3 of the crew members inside, including their popular young commander, Karl Kellner, while leaving the remaining soldiers pinned down and helpless in a bomb crater. The shock of realization is instant and devastating. A lethal German Panther is waiting in ambush, and in these tight, rubbled streets, the standard American tanks are nothing but targets of thin steel facing a high-velocity German 75mm, 2.95 inches, gun that can pierce their armor effortlessly. The contrast beneath the spires of the ancient cathedral is brutal, cinematic, and unforgettable. A monument built over centuries to honor the divine now stands as the backdrop to the most terrifying and destructive mechanization of modern armored warfare. This is no longer just another desperate, chaotic street fight. It is a rare, high-stakes duel between the late-war armored apex predators of two warring nations. Realizing that the standard Shermans stand absolutely no chance of survival and that any further frontal advance is suicide, the American commanders call forward their only hope. Gliding through the adjacent streets is the T-26E3 Pershing, a machine known informally as Eagle 7. This is America's long-awaited, highly classified answer to the heavy armor of Europe, carrying a massive 90mm, 3.54 inches, gun and thick cast armor designed to stand toe-to-toe with Germany's best. As the Pershing maneuvers into position through the ruins, the tension in the shattered city reaches a breaking point. This is the ultimate, brutal test of America's engineering and resolve, happening not on a peaceful proving ground, but on a rubbled German street with burning tanks, trapped crews, and a lethal Panther waiting in the shadows. To fully understand how American armored forces found themselves in this desperate position, it is necessary to look back at the machine that carried them across the battlefields of Europe, the ubiquitous M4 Sherman. For decades, popular history and post-war myths have labeled the Sherman a death trap, but the historical reality is far more nuanced, practical, and grounded in the realities of global logistics. The Sherman was never intended to be a heavy breakthrough tank, designed primarily to hunt and destroy other tanks. It was an industrial miracle of mass production, operational reliability, and strategic mobility. It was built to be light enough to be shipped across vast oceans by the thousands, narrow enough to fit on standard European railway flat cars, and simple enough that its crew could easily maintain and repair it in a muddy field with basic tools. The Sherman's true mission was to support infantry, eliminate enemy bunkers, destroy soft targets like anti-tank guns, and exploit massive gaps in the enemy line to sweep across continents. For the highly mobile, fast-paced offensive war the Allies wanted to fight, the Sherman was an incredibly successful and reliable tool that allowed Allied armies to outmaneuver their opponents over thousands of miles. But Nazi Germany was fighting a very different kind of war, particularly in the later stages of the conflict. Facing a massive war of attrition on multiple fronts against numerically superior enemies, German armored doctrine shifted heavily toward qualitative superiority. They did not prioritize cheap, easily mass-produced designs. Instead, they demanded highly specialized, heavily armored breakthrough vehicles equipped with high-velocity guns that could dominate defensive engagements and destroy enemy tanks from extreme ranges. The ultimate realization of this design philosophy was the Panzer V Panther, a formidable medium tank weighing approximately 45 tons, about 99,200 pounds. The Panther was born out of a strategic crisis on the Eastern Front in 1941, when German forces were utterly shocked by the sloped armor and mobility of the Soviet T-34. Rushing to respond, German engineers incorporated sloped frontal armor, wide tracks for cross-country movement, and the devastating long-barreled 75mm, 2.95 inches KWK 42L/70 gun. This weapon fired high-velocity shells with incredible muzzle velocity, allowing it to penetrate the frontal armor of a Sherman from distances where the American crew could not even accurately return fire. In combat, a single Panther could sit on an open ridge or hide in a narrow city street, effectively acting as an impenetrable mobile bunker that terrorized Allied tank crews. The American response to this qualitative gap was slow, hesitant, and heavily delayed by intense bureaucratic debates. For much of the war, senior military leadership in the United States resisted fielding a heavy tank, clinging to the doctrine that tanks were meant to support infantry, while fast, lightly armored tank destroyers should hunt enemy armor. This conceptual gridlock delayed the development of a true, heavy-hitting American tank until the bloody lessons of Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge shattered those assumptions. The urgent demand for a heavy, breakthrough vehicle finally resulted in the T-26E3, later designated the M26 Pershing. Weighing approximately 41.9 tons, about 92,300 pounds, The Pershing was a radical departure from the tall, narrow Sherman. It featured a low-profile, crouching silhouette, wide tracks, and cast homogeneous steel frontal armor over 100 millimeters, 4 inches, thick. Crucially, it carried the powerful 90 millimeter, 3.54 inches, M3 main gun. To the crews of the secret Zebra mission, who received the first 20 pre-production Pershings in early 1945, this new tank represented a long overdue promise, a machine that could finally face Germany's heaviest armor on equal terms. For the crew of Eagle 7, getting their hands on this revolutionary machine had been a profound revelation of raw power. Just weeks earlier in Stolberg, east of Aachen, Sergeant Bob Early and his men had been ordered to turn in their trusted Sherman to begin immediate transition training on the top secret Pershing. Their gunner, Corporal Clarence Smoyer, recalled the sheer anxiety of sitting in the gunner seat of the new weapon for a live-fire demonstration. With Major General Maurice Rose and a crowd of officers standing only 50 feet away, Smoyer was told to target a damaged farmhouse chimney. He centered his sights, took a deep breath, and squeezed the trigger located on the turret grip. Unlike the Sherman, which utilized a foot pedal, the Pershing's hand trigger responded instantly. The resulting blast was of a scale none of the men had ever experienced. The blinding muzzle flash, deafening roar, and violent shockwave of the 90 millimeter gun literally knocked the general and his entourage off their feet, while the targeted chimney exploded into a cloud of red dust. To the tankers, it was a terrifying but incredibly reassuring display. They finally had a weapon that did not require them to run away or seek a complex flanking angle. They had a gun that could punch straight through the frontal armor of a Panther and solve the problem permanently. As the division pushed deeper into the German heartland, the reality of war continued to extract a heavy price, and the advance on Cologne was shadowed by tragedy. Just before the fateful encounter near the cathedral, the ruined city streets had witnessed the heartbreaking civilian cost of modern conflict. A young German woman named Katharina Esser was attempting to flee through the ruins when she was tragically caught in a sudden, violent crossfire between a Sherman and retreating German troops. Both sides fired, and she was mortally wounded in her vehicle. This devastating event cast a long, somber shadow over the soldiers of both armies, a grim reminder that behind the technological romance of armored clashes lay the cold, indiscriminate slaughter of total war. By March 1945, the military situation for Germany was entirely catastrophic, and the Allied forces were breaking through the final defenses of the Reich. Cologne, once a magnificent and historic German city, was now a smoking, desolate wasteland, pulverized by hundreds of Allied bombing raids. The streets were choked with towering mountains of brick and stone rubble, limiting any advancing tank's ability to maneuver and providing defenders with endless opportunities for ambush. Wilhelm Battelbot's Panther was one of the last remaining German tanks in the city center, positioned near the main railway station, with its back to the blown Hohenzollern Bridge. As the Shermans of Company F turned onto Komödienstrasse, they were funneled directly into the Panther's sights. The ambush was swift, precise, and brutal. With 2 quick shots, the Panther's high-velocity 75mm, 2.95 inches, gun tore through the lead Sherman, instantly killing 3 of its crew members and mortally wounding its commander. A third shell shattered the tracks of the second Sherman, trapping the infantry in a deadly crossfire. Hearing the frantic and terrifying radio reports, the commander of the nearby Pershing, Sergeant Bob Early, knew he had to act. His crew, including driver Homer Davis and gunner Clarence Smoyer, had been training on the new tank for only a few weeks. They knew they were the only ones nearby with a gun powerful enough to pierce the Panther's thick-sloped armor. Early devised a high-stakes flanking maneuver. Rather than charging down the main street into the jaws of the trap, the Pershing would navigate parallel streets and approach the intersection of Marzellenstrasse from the side, hoping to catch the Panther's thinner 40mm, 1.57 inches side armor. To ensure they were not walking into a secondary ambush, Sergeant Early and U.S. Army Signal Corps cameraman Sergeant Jim Bates crept forward on foot through a damaged building. Peering through the dust-covered windows, they looked south down Marzellenstrasse and spotted the Panther idling quietly near the central station. It was a terrifying sight. The Panther's gun was trained down the adjacent street, waiting for more Shermans to emerge. Early sprinted back to the Pershing and ordered the driver to move out. The tension was absolute, as the heavy 46-ton, about 101,000 pounds, Pershing ground its way through the rubble-filled alleys. But as they neared the intersection, the veteran German commander, Wilhelm Bartelborth, heard the deep, unfamiliar roar of the approaching engine. Sensing a flank attack, he ordered his gunner to swing the Panther's turret to the right, pre-aiming the gun directly at the very corner where the American tank would have to appear. Up in a nearby building, Jim Bates had his movie camera rolling, capturing a scene of pure, unbearable suspense. As Eagle 7 slowly edged around the corner of the brick building, Gunner Clarence Smoyer looked through his periscope and his heart stopped. Instead of seeing the vulnerable side of the Panther, he was staring directly down the dark, hollow muzzle of the German 75mm, 2.95 inches, gun, aimed straight at his chest. In a real tank duel, there is no room for error, and the entire engagement is decided in a matter of seconds. The German crew had every advantage. They were stationary, pre-aimed, and had the drop on the Americans. But as the unfamiliar, low-profile American tank emerged from the ruins, Bartelborth hesitated. He had never seen a Pershing before. Its cast steel nose and massive turret looked nothing like a Sherman. In the split-second confusion of battle, he believed it might be a German vehicle and ordered his gunner to hold fire. That hesitation was all the Americans needed. Realizing they were completely exposed, driver Homer Davis slammed his foot on the accelerator, driving the Pershing directly into the middle of the intersection so they wouldn't be a sitting duck. Gunner Clarence Smoyer, with no time to stop and stabilize his sight, fired on the move. The 90mm shell roared from the barrel, striking the side of the Panther's hull with a violent explosion. The impact penetrated deep into the crew compartment. As the Pershing stopped, Smoyer didn't hesitate. He knew that a single hit rarely guaranteed a kill, and any surviving crew member inside that Panther could still pull the trigger and destroy them. He yelled for another armor-piercing round. His second shot struck the Panther's turret ring, and his third hit the lower hull, igniting a catastrophic fuel fire. As black smoke and towering flames erupted from the hatches, several German crew members scrambled to escape, their clothes alight. The entire battle had taken less than a minute. Captured in agonizing detail by Jim Bates's camera, it remains one of the most vivid and terrifying records of armored combat in history. While the victory of the Pershing was highly dramatic and symbolically powerful, a serious historical analysis reveals that it did not single-handedly change the course of World War II. By March 1945, the German war machine was already in its death throes, suffering from critical shortages of fuel, spare parts, and experienced replacement crews. The vast majority of German tanks were destroyed not in epic tank duels, but by overwhelming Allied tactical air power, heavy artillery, or simply because their crews ran out of fuel and had to abandon them. If the Pershing had never arrived, the fall of Cologne and the ultimate defeat of Germany would have still occurred on the same timeline. Yet, to dismiss the Pershing would be a grave mistake. For the American tank crews who had spent years fighting with a sense of qualitative inferiority, the M26 represented a profound psychological breakthrough. It was a tangible proof that their nation could build a weapon capable of standing toe-to-toe with the very best Europe had to offer, giving them a sense of security and confidence that had been missing in the long, bloody march from the beaches of Normandy. A balanced comparison reveals that both the Panther and the Pershing were outstanding, yet deeply flawed machines, reflecting the distinct pressures of their respective creators. The Panther possessed an incredibly powerful gun and nearly impenetrable frontal armor, making it a defensive masterpiece at long range. But it was mechanically fragile, difficult to maintain, and produced by an economy that could no longer support its complexity. The Pershing was a massive leap forward for the United States, offering excellent armor and a highly versatile gun, but it was severely underpowered, utilizing a modified 500 horsepower Ford GAF engine to move a heavy frame of approximately 41.9 tons, about 92,300 pounds, which limited its tactical mobility. Ultimately, the famous duel in front of the Cologne Cathedral was not the battle that decided the Second World War, but it remains one of the most unforgettable armored encounters of the conflict because it captured a turning point in a single, burning image. It was the moment the old world of German armored dominance cracked, showing a feared panther burning in the shadow of the cathedral, destroyed by America's long-awaited answer. It was not the end of the war, but it was the undeniable dawn of a new age of armored warfare. I hope you enjoyed this story about the clash between the Panther and the Pershing, and if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend my video about the M18 Hellcat, the American tank destroyer that sacrificed armor for speed, and used that speed to hunt down Germany's giant armored machines.